So today we're going to be installing the BC Racing coilovers on my 2005 350Z Roadster. So we're going to be removing this 17mm nut, these 14mm nuts up here, and we're also going to be removing the 17mm bolt and nut that are down here, so that we can remove the old spring and the shock. Make sure you jack up the lower control arm so you can hold it in place while you remove that bolt and the spring doesn't come launching at you. Next, you take your 17mm wrench and you loosen up the bolt in the back. Now we can remove the old spring, the spring perch, and the old bump stop. Now we gotta loosen up the lower bolt. Holy shit. What's on there? This one isn't too bad. Make sure you put this bolt to the side because you're going to be reusing it with the new nut that comes with your BC Racing coilover. Now we'll loosen up the 14mm nuts up top. And your old shock should come out pretty easily. Maybe we should run the other one. That's it. So now you get your rear coilovers. You can tell it's the rear because it matches the top of your old ones. 2 bolt holes instead of 3 like the ones in the front. Like I said, it comes with the hardware that you're going to need. The new replacement nut, since the one on your old one was built in to your lower bracket. And this one doesn't have it, so they include this nut. So if you compare the two, you can actually tell that this is actually the shock separated from the spring, and the new coilover is it's all one unit. I chose this specifically because I was planning on removing the lower buckets anyway, and I don't know, it just makes for an easier, faster install. So the installation is going to be the same as removal. We're going to start by putting our shock back in. So we'll start at the top. That way it'll hold itself on with the top bolts or the top nuts. Then you can actually spin it a little bit and line the bolt holes on the bottom with your stock bolt. And the new nut that came with your BC Racing coilovers. Eventually I'm going to change out this whole unit for a adjustable control arm, but for now, or at least until I get it, I'm going to keep the stock unit here and just replace it with the old nut and bolt that came with it. Don't forget to tighten up the ones that hold the top hat up. That's going to be your 14 millimeter again. And that's it. Put your tire back on and you're good to go. So to do the front side, we're actually going to have to remove the strut tower bar first. And I believe those are 14 millimeter bolts. You have 4 of them on each side. Or in my case, 3 on one side since one is missing and 4 on the other. You also have the wiring loom that you have to remove here and on that side. So let's get that started real quick. Now you should be able to pop these off with just some pliers. And then when you have them off, just lift up and your strut tower bar comes off. So for the removal of the front strut assembly, we are actually going to be removing the ABS lines, the sway bar end link, and the innermost part of the lower control arm, and then obviously disconnecting the actual assembly from the lower control arm. We're going to be removing this piece, that way it'll make it easier. If we drop this thing, it just pops down the whole assembly. We're going to start off by removing the end link from the lower control arm with a 17 millimeter socket. And then we'll grab a 19 millimeter on our breaker bar. Then we'll loosen up the bottom of the strut. after we loosen it up, we get our 19mm on the breaker bar, 19mm wrench. Loosen up the inner part of the lower control arm. Once we have that removed, we just pop out the end link, remove the lower bolt to the strut, and then don't forget to pop off the ABS line and the brake line that is attached to the other side of the strut. That you have everything disconnected from the strut bar and the lower control arm, just go ahead and tap the lower control arm out of its little staging area there. Now that you have the lower control arm freed and everything else is off, you can go ahead and move up to the top of the strut and get the right fucking socket. Remove the 3 nuts that hold the strut onto the chassis. You won't be reusing these because you are provided with new ones by BC Racing on your new coilovers. Now just go ahead and push the lower control arm down. And pop the strut off. And remove it from the car. As I stated before, you get new hardware. Just make sure you actually have the hardware on there before you discard your other ones or throw them into your bolt bucket. Because you never know. Maybe they didn't supply new hardware. And so what we're going to do is, the same way we took the old one out, we're going to put the new one in. Make sure you're facing the, this piece faces the way that your brake, it's literally my hand that you were showing. Jesus Christ. Make sure that this is facing the right way in the direction that your the brake line goes on. So in this driver's side, it's going to go towards the back of the car. And so go ahead and fish it in, up and into the bolt holes that go on the chassis, and then use use the hardware, new hardware on the bolts. To hold it in place while you get everything else buttoned up in the bottom. Now, I would say finger tighten these for now, because once the car is lowered, you'll be able to tighten them up properly with all the with the car's weight on it. So we'll start off by attaching the lower control arm. Tighten up your lower control arm and tighten up your end link. If you have enough movement, you can try on the line the lower control arm hole to your strut hole. And tighten it down with your 17mm socket and wrench. Install your ABS lines and install your brake line onto the provided stud on your coilover. Later on I'll be changing out the lines for stainless steel lines, but that'll be a little further down the line. Good and tight, and now you can double check everything, make sure everything's on correctly, and you can go ahead and throw your wheel on. Now that everything underneath the car is nice and tidy and tight and you're sure that everything is good to go, go ahead and lower the car and come up to the top, and you're going to tighten the 3 nuts that hold your coilover to your chassis. Like the Germans say, good and tight. I don't have a torque wrench right now, so this is just gonna have to do. And that's it. Throw your strut bar on and you're good to go.